Imagine a structure so vast, so impossibly complex, that it made the Great Pyramids of Giza look modest by comparison. We're talking about 3,000 rooms spread across two massive levels, connected by passages so intricate that ancient visitors needed guides just to avoid getting hopelessly lost inside. This was the legendary Labyrinth of Egypt, and if you've never heard of it, there's a fascinating reason why. The Greek historian Herodotus stood before this architectural wonder around 450 BC, and he couldn't contain his amazement. He wrote that the labyrinth surpassed even the pyramids in every conceivable way. Think about that for a moment. The pyramids, structures that have dominated our imagination for millennia, were considered inferior to this massive complex. Herodotus walked through halls lined with columns, explored countless chambers, and described a building so elaborate that it defied belief. He wasn't alone in his assessment either. Other ancient writers who saw the labyrinth echoed his astonishment, each one struggling to find words adequate to describe what they'd witnessed. So here's the question that should be burning in your mind right now. Where did it go? How does something bigger than the pyramids simply vanish from history? Let me paint you a picture of what this place actually looked like. The labyrinth wasn't just big, it was methodically enormous. 1,500 rooms existed above ground, each one decorated and purposeful. But that was only half the story. Beneath your feet, if you had stood there in ancient times, another 1,500 chambers stretched into the earth. The passages connecting these rooms twisted and turned with such complexity that the ancient writers claimed you could wander for days without retracing your steps. The upper level alone covered an area that would make modern megamalls look quaint. Courtyards opened into halls, halls led to chambers, and chambers connected to corridors that seemed to go on forever. The ancient accounts described walls covered in reliefs and hieroglyphs, ceilings supported by countless pillars, and a design so sophisticated that it served as both a temple and an administrative center for all of Egypt. Each of the 42 nomes or provinces of ancient Egypt had its own dedicated section within the complex, making it a kind of governmental headquarters where representatives from across the kingdom could gather. The roof itself was a marvel, constructed from single slabs of stone so large that engineers today would scratch their heads trying to figure out how they were lifted into place. And the decoration, according to those who saw it, rivaled anything else Egypt had produced. We're talking about a civilization that gave us the Valley of the Kings, the Temple of Karnak, and Abu Simbel, and they considered this structure their crowning achievement in complexity and grandeur. But here's where the story takes a dark turn. Over the centuries, something terrible happened to this magnificent structure. As dynasties rose and fell, as Egypt's power waned and new civilizations took control, the labyrinth became something else entirely. It became a quarry. Imagine the irony. The same stones that once formed one of humanity's greatest achievements were slowly, methodically stripped away. Builders needed materials for new projects, and here was a convenient source of pre-cut limestone and granite. Century after century, the walls came down. The magnificent halls were dismantled block by block. The intricate passages were reduced to rubble. By the time the Roman period ended, almost nothing remained above ground except scattered foundations and fragments that gave only the faintest hint of what had once stood there. The labyrinth didn't disappear in some dramatic catastrophe. It was erased slowly, pragmatically, by people who saw building materials instead of history. And eventually, even the memory of its exact location faded into uncertainty. The very ground where it stood was gradually covered by sand, by the debris of its own destruction, and by the accumulated dust of millennia. For 2,000 years, scholars debated whether Herodotus had exaggerated or even invented the whole thing. Maybe it was just ancient propaganda. Maybe the stories had grown in the telling. After all, how could something so massive leave so little trace? The skeptics had a point. When you can't find evidence of something that supposedly dwarfed the pyramids, you start to question whether it ever existed at all. Then came 2008. A team of researchers calling themselves the Matahat Expedition arrived in Egypt with something the ancients never had: ground-penetrating radar. They focused their equipment on an area near the pyramid of Amenemhat III, where fragments and clues suggested the labyrinth might have stood. The team worked methodically, scanning the ground in careful grids, looking for any sign that the ancient accounts might have been true. What they found changed everything. The radar images revealed unmistakable structures beneath the sand, not just random ruins, but organized, geometric patterns consistent with a massive architectural complex. The data showed chambers, passages, and walls, all hidden beneath meters of sand and soil. The readings indicated a structure of immense proportions, one that matched the scale described in the ancient texts. The labyrinth wasn't a myth. It wasn't an exaggeration. It was real, and it's still there. The structure that Herodotus described that surpassed the pyramids in complexity and scale is lying beneath the Egyptian desert right now. It wasn't destroyed completely. It was buried, covered by time, sand, and the debris of its own dismantling, but the foundations remain. The lower levels, the ones Herodotus mentioned but wasn't allowed to enter because they contained royal tombs, those might still be intact. Protected by the very sand and rubble that hid them from the world, they could be waiting in the darkness, preserved by accident. Think about what this means. One of the ancient world's greatest architectural achievements is sitting underground, waiting. The technology exists to explore it. The location is known, but excavation requires resources, permissions, and time that haven't yet aligned. Political considerations, funding challenges, and the sheer complexity of such an undertaking have kept the labyrinth buried even after its rediscovery. So here we are, in the 21st century, knowing that beneath the sand lies a 3,000-room complex that once rivaled the pyramids. It's not lost. It's not gone. It's just buried, waiting for the day when someone has the will and the means to bring it back into the light.
This raises an unsettling question, doesn't it? If something as massive as the labyrinth can hide beneath our feet for 2 millennia, what else are we walking over? How many other wonders that we've relegated to mythology are actually just buried realities? The labyrinth teaches us that absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. It reminds us that the ancients were capable of achievements that still stagger our imagination. And it proves that history isn't always written in stone monuments that last forever. Sometimes it's written in stones that get recycled, and structures that get buried, and marvels that slip beneath the surface and wait.